All right, listen up because today we're diving into something that hits deep for a lot of us. The real reason someone comes back into your life, especially after they've been gone, is not always as straightforward as it seems. A lot of us get caught up in the fairy tale idea of grand gestures or sudden realizations. We think, oh, they must have had an epiphany, a light bulb moment where they realize they can't live without us. But if we're being honest with ourselves, that's not always the truth. The real reason someone comes back is a little more nuanced, and it's something you need to understand if you want to stop repeating old patterns and start creating a better future, both for you and for them. First of all, let's make something crystal clear. People don't always come back because they made a mistake or because they suddenly realized you were their one true love. Sometimes they come back because they're comfortable, because you're a known quantity. People are drawn to what's familiar. We're creatures of habit, and stepping back into something familiar can feel safer than venturing into the unknown. That's not a bad thing, but it's also not necessarily a reflection of the depth of the feelings they once had. It's about comfort, it's about security, it's about having a fallback when life throws them for a loop. People often return to what feels familiar and comfortable, and that doesn't always mean they've had a profound moment of clarity or emotional awakening. It's easy to assume that when someone comes back into your life after time apart, it's because they've deeply realized your value or that they've gone through some transformative journey that led them to recognize you as their true connection. However, the truth is often more about the pull of familiarity than anything deeply romantic or life altering. Humans are creatures of habit, and that habit can drive us back to what we know, especially when faced with uncertainty or discomfort. When people face difficult situations or emotional turmoil, the instinctive reaction is often to seek comfort in what feels safe and secure. This could be an old relationship, an old friendship, or a familiar environment. The emotional safety of something they've experienced before can feel like a soft place to land when the world around them feels unstable. The return isn't necessarily a reflection of the growth they've undergone during the time apart, but rather a desire to find something better, something that offers them a sense of stability. It's like returning home after a long trip. What's familiar is comfortable, even if it's not perfect. This tendency to seek comfort can be a double-edged sword. While familiarity can bring warmth and a sense of security, it can also prevent real growth. If someone comes back to you simply because they miss what was familiar and not because they've evolved in some meaningful way, the relationship might fall back into the same patterns that led to the separation in the first place. The comfort of the old relationship can provide temporary relief, but it doesn't guarantee lasting change or a healthier dynamic. Relationships need growth and evolution, and when people return to what's comfortable without addressing the underlying issues, they risk the same mistakes or creating the same frustrations that cause the distance between you. It's also worth noting that this comfort-driven return doesn't always mean that the person values you more or sees you in a different light. It could mean that they miss the emotional connection, the companionship, or the support that came with the relationship, but not necessarily that they've had a revelation about how important you are in their life. Sometimes people come back not because they've had a moment of deep introspection, but because they are searching for something that feels easy, something they don't have to work too hard at. What makes this more complicated is the fact that familiarity often clouds judgment. When something feels familiar, we might ignore the flaws, overlook the issues, or convince ourselves that things will be different this time around. But in reality, the comfort that brought them back might be a temporary solution to a deeper emotional need rather than a sign of true commitment or readiness for change. People return to what feels familiar because it's easy, but true growth and emotional maturity come from pushing past comfort zones and stepping into new spaces, new understandings, and new dynamics. Understanding this dynamic is important because it helps you assess whether the return is truly about love, growth, or just the comfort of what's known. Recognizing that familiarity is a powerful force can guide you in making decisions that support your emotional well-being. When someone returns to you, it's crucial to assess not just their reasons for coming back, but also whether they've genuinely grown and are ready to contribute to a healthy, evolving relationship. Comfort often brings people back, especially when they feel lost or uncertain. Life has a way of throwing curveballs, and when things get tough or overwhelming, it's natural for someone to seek solace in what feels familiar. Familiarity provides a sense of stability, a place where things once felt safe and known. This is especially true in relationships where people often feel a sense of emotional security in someone they've shared significant time with. When the outside world feels chaotic, the pull to return to what's familiar becomes stronger. This is not necessarily a reflection of deeper emotions or revelations, but more about the human tendency to seek refuge in what provides a sense of comfort and reassurance. When we're facing uncertainty, whether in our careers, social circles, or personal lives, the thought of returning to something that once brought peace or happiness can feel like a lifeline. This doesn't mean that the person coming back has undergone some profound emotional awakening or transformation. It simply means that they are looking for something stable, something they know they can rely on, even if it wasn't perfect before. The connection may have provided them with emotional safety, even if it was only temporary or came with its own set of challenges. The problem is comfort can sometimes mask the deeper issues that existed in the relationship, and those issues might resurface once the initial relief from the return fades. For many people, the idea of vulnerability can be terrifying. It requires putting yourself in a place of uncertainty and potential rejection. When you return to something or someone that, that emotional risk feels smaller. The fear of the unknown is a strong force, and returning to something comfortable, even if it wasn't flawless, feels less intimidating than starting from scratch. This feeling of familiarity brings a sense of emotional safety, one that temporarily eases the discomfort of the unknown. It's a quick fix for feelings of emotional loneliness or confusion, but it isn't always the long-term solution that creates lasting fulfillment. This comfort-based return can be an attempt to avoid dealing with deeper emotional issues or fears. Rather than facing what went wrong or processing personal growth, people sometimes look for a quick way to feel better. The relationship offers a form of emotional reprieve without requiring them to address the hard work of change. It's like choosing an old worn-in pair of shoes rather than stepping into something new that might be more uncomfortable at first, but ultimately fits better. When someone returns because of comfort, they might not be doing it because they've healed or learned from past mistakes. They might just be looking for a temporary fix to the deeper emotional void they're experiencing. Comfort can also bring people back because it feels like a safe place to avoid dealing with the pain of a breakup or the stress of being alone. The thought of starting fresh with someone else can be overwhelming, especially if someone feels uncertain about what they truly want. The emotional safety of something known, even if it didn't work out before, might feel like a more manageable option. It's the idea that something familiar can provide a sense of control in a world that often feels out of control. The return isn't necessarily about rekindling the same connection, but about finding a way to make the present feel more comfortable, more familiar, and more manageable in the face of emotional turmoil. However, comfort is a temporary solution, not a long-term fix. Returning to the familiar may offer a sense of emotional relief, but it does not guarantee that the issues from the past have been resolved or that the relationship will be healthier the second time around. Comfort can act as a balm for the moment, but for any relationship to grow, it needs more than just familiarity. It needs real emotional investment, willingness to change, and the commitment to evolve together. Absence doesn't always make the heart grow fonder. Sometimes it just makes the heart miss the familiarity of the relationship. We often romanticize the idea that time apart will lead to a deeper understanding or renewed appreciation of someone. We think that when people are separated, they will realize how much they truly mean to each other and return with a renewed sense of love. However, the reality is often less poetic. Time apart can certainly cause people to reflect on what they've lost, but it can also stir up feelings of nostalgia and longing for the comfort and familiarity that the relationship once provided, rather than a true yearning for the person themselves. When someone is separated from a partner, they might not immediately miss the individual's unique qualities or the depth of the connection they shared. Instead, they may miss the predictability and emotional security that the relationship provided. Relationships can offer comfort in knowing someone is there for you, someone who understands you in a way that others may not. This sense of security can be incredibly soothing during times of uncertainty or emotional distress. But this doesn't necessarily equate to missing the person for who they are or desiring to reconnect on a deeper level. It's about missing the emotional safety net, the routine, and the closeness that came with the relationship, not necessarily the person who was part of it. The idea of longing for familiarity can often cloud our judgment when someone comes back into our lives. People can mistake their longing for familiarity with genuine love. The absence of someone can create a sense of emotional void that needs filling. This emotional void can lead people to look for something familiar to fill that space. In many cases, people find themselves revisiting past relationships not because they have fallen more deeply in love with the person, but because the relationship itself represents something that feels secure. It feels like home. It's easy to forget the difficulties and the reasons why things ended, especially when you're confronted with the absence of what you once knew. The comfort of a relationship, even if it wasn't perfect, can become more appealing in the face of loneliness or uncertainty. This longing for what's familiar is often more about emotional needs than it is about genuine romantic desire. When someone returns after being apart, it's essential to ask whether they are coming back because they truly changed or because they found themselves missing the comfort and security that the relationship once gave them. Familiarity breeds a sense of emotional stability, which is something people naturally seek, especially when they feel vulnerable or uncertain. But it's important to understand that longing for something familiar doesn't always translate to a renewed connection with the person themselves. When someone misses the familiarity of a relationship, it can also signify that they're not ready to embrace something new or are unwilling to put in the effort required to build something fresh with someone else. It's easier to return to what they know than to take a risk on something unfamiliar. This longing for the past might not necessarily stem from a deep emotional connection, but from the comfort of what once was. The desire to fill the emotional space left by their absence can make them return, but it doesn't guarantee that the relationship will evolve or be healthier than it was before. In many cases, people mistake the return to familiarity for a return to true emotional connection. It's crucial to differentiate between the two, recognizing that while people may come back because they miss what they once had, that doesn't always mean they processed their past actions or learned from the mistakes that led to the separation. The heart may miss the comfort, but it doesn't always miss the individual for who they are in their entirety. They may return without fully understanding or growing from the past mistakes. Often, when someone comes back into your life after a period of separation, it can feel like they've had a sudden realization, like they've learned their lesson and are now ready to give the relationship the attention and care it deserves. We want to believe that their return signifies growth and introspection, that they've reflected on their past behavior and are now willing to do things differently. However, in many cases, this isn't true. People can come back without having truly understood or processed the reasons why things fell apart in the first place. They might not have gained the emotional maturity required to avoid making the same mistakes again. When someone returns without having fully grown, they're often still carrying the same baggage, the same unresolved issues that led to the breakup in the first place. They may be seeking comfort, familiarity, or simply filling a void in their life without realizing that the issues that caused the original separation are still present. It's common for people to convince themselves that they've changed or that time apart has healed all wounds, but unless they've genuinely done the work to understand their past mistakes and take responsibility for them, the same patterns are likely to reemerge. Returning to someone without acknowledging what went wrong in the past is not an indication of growth, but rather an attempt to return to something familiar without dealing with the underlying problems that caused the breakup. This lack of growth can also be frustrating because it creates an imbalance in the relationship. One person may have taken the time and effort to heal, reflect, and grow, while the other may simply be looking for a quick fix or a return to comfort. When one person comes back without having done the necessary internal work, the relationship becomes uneven. The person who has grown may feel like they are putting in more effort, while the person returning might expect things to simply fall back into place as if nothing ever happened. This can lead to resentment, frustration, and a sense of being unappreciated because the growth required for a healthy relationship isn't being reciprocated. Additionally, when someone returns without growth, they are more likely to repeat the same mistakes that caused the breakup in the first place. They may not have learned from the past because they haven't taken the time to understand their own actions and the impact those actions had on the relationship. It's easy to return to what is familiar, to think that things will be different this time, but unless both people involved are willing to take a hard look at what went wrong and actively work toward creating change, it's very likely that the same problems will resurface. The absence of true growth can make the relationship feel like a cycle where nothing changes and the same issues arise again and again. This dynamic can also affect the level of trust between the two people. When someone returns without acknowledging their past mistakes, it can make the other person feel like their pain, their needs, or their boundaries were not fully respected. Trust is built on accountability, and if one person is unwilling to take responsibility for what happened and grow from it, it becomes difficult to rebuild trust. The foundation of the relationship remains shaky, and it's hard to feel secure when the past mistakes are left unaddressed. In the end, returning without growth means returning to an incomplete version of the relationship. Without introspection, accountability, and a true desire to change, the same patterns will likely continue. It's important to recognize this and understand that genuine change doesn't happen overnight. And if someone is coming back without having grown, it's essential to consider whether they are truly ready to offer something better or if they are simply seeking comfort without making the necessary effort. A person might come back because they miss the security and emotional safety of the relationship, not necessarily the person you've become. It's easy to assume that when someone returns to your life, they've come to appreciate the new version of you, the person who's grown, evolved, and transformed since the relationship ended. However, in many cases, their return has more to do with the comfort and emotional security that the relationship once offered than it does with recognizing or valuing the person you've become. People are drawn to familiarity, and relationships often provide a sense of stability and emotional safety that can be hard to find elsewhere. When someone returns, it's not always about who you are now, but about the emotional refuge they once experienced with you. The emotional safety that a relationship provides is powerful. It offers a sense of reliability, something that feels dependable even in times of emotional uncertainty. During times of stress or hardship, the longing for that security can become stronger, and returning to something familiar can feel like the easiest way to relieve the discomfort of those difficult emotions. People often miss the stability that a relationship offers, the sense that someone is there to support them through the ups and downs of life. The emotional connection may not have been perfect, but it was something they could rely on, and the comfort of that reliance can be a strong motivator for someone to return. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that the person has a deep, renewed appreciation for who you've become. Instead, it's about the emotional support they remember receiving from you. When someone is going through tough times, they might look back at the relationship and miss the way you made them feel safe, understood, and cared for. They might not be coming back because they've seen the incredible person you've grown into, but because they're seeking the comfort and security that your presence once gave them. This kind of return often has less to do with the individual growth you've undergone and more to do with the emotional relief that a familiar relationship offers during a challenging time. There is also the possibility that someone comes back because they've realized how much they need that emotional support. Relationships, at their best, provide not just companionship, but a sense of protection from the world. They offer a person someone to lean on, someone who has their back when things get tough. When people feel emotionally drained, overwhelmed, or uncertain, the temptation to return to a relationship that once provided that emotional cushion can be strong. The return isn't necessarily a sign that they're ready to invest in the new version of you, but rather an indication that they missed the safety net they once had. In some cases, the return may also reflect the person's fear of being alone. The emotional security that a relationship offers can sometimes be more about avoiding the discomfort of loneliness than it is about desiring to rekindle a romantic connection. People can become accustomed to the emotional closeness of being in a relationship, and when that closeness is gone, the emotional void can feel overwhelming. Returning to someone they've been with before can seem like an easy way to fill that space without having to confront the complexities of starting fresh with someone new. While it may feel validating to have someone return to you, it's important to recognize that their motivations might be rooted in their own emotional needs rather than a desire to appreciate who you've become. The emotional security they are seeking may not necessarily align with the person you are now or the person you worked hard to become. It's essential to be clear about whether they are returning because they genuinely value you for who you are today, or because they are simply looking for the comfort of something familiar to alleviate their emotional discomfort. A financial return is often a key factor in why someone returns to a past relationship. While this might seem like a shallow reason at first glance, it's important to understand that financial dynamics can deeply influence the way people navigate relationships. Money, while not the most romantic aspect of a partnership, can play a major role in the stability and comfort that individuals experience within it. When a person is going through a tough financial situation, the safety of a past relationship can feel like a secure place to turn to, especially if they were financially supported or felt a sense of financial stability while together. The return is not necessarily driven by love or emotional connection, but by the need for practical support. In relationships, financial dependence or interdependence often exists, whether it's in the form of shared responsibilities, one person contributing more financially, or an unspoken understanding that financial support will be provided in times of need. When someone is struggling financially, whether due to a loss of job, financial hardships, or simply being in a difficult place in life, they may return to a relationship because they remember the financial security it once offered. Financial stress can feel overwhelming, and in the face of that pressure, it's easy to see how someone might gravitate back to what they know can provide some relief. Returning to a partner who was previously supportive financially can feel like a safety net when they're unsure how to navigate the challenges they're facing on their own. This return, however, is often not as simple as it may seem. If someone returns to you for financial reasons, it's important to understand the context of their action. They may be looking for temporary relief, or they may believe that the past relationship will offer the kind of stability they need to get back on their feet. In some cases, the return is about using the relationship as a stepping stone to recover financially rather than a genuine attempt to reconnect emotionally or romantically. It's easy to miss the signs of someone returning for the wrong reasons because financial security can be a subtle but powerful motivator. This dynamic can create power imbalances in relationships. If one person returns solely because of financial reasons, the other person may feel taken advantage of or like their kindness and support are being exploited. It's crucial to recognize that financial support should be a mutual exchange based on respect and care, not just one-sided. When someone comes back because they need financial help, they might not be bringing anything to the table in terms of emotional growth or commitment. They might simply be returning to someone who they know can offer temporary relief to their financial struggles. Financial dependence can also lead to a cycle where someone constantly returns to a partner during times of financial hardship, but leaves once they've regained their financial footing. This creates a relationship dynamic that is not sustainable, healthy, or balanced. It's important for both partners to understand the reasons behind the return and to assess whether the relationship can truly grow beyond the practical needs that are being fulfilled. While financial stability is important, it should not be the foundation of a relationship. If one person is coming back for financial reasons, it's essential to communicate openly about expectations, boundaries, and needs to ensure that both individuals are entering the situation with clarity and mutual respect. Ultimately, when someone returns for financial reasons, it's crucial to look beyond the immediate relief it offers and consider whether the return is based on genuine emotional connection or simply a temporary solution to a problem. Financial motivations can mask the true intentions behind a return, and it's important to assess whether the relationship can offer more than just financial security if it's going to have lasting value for both people involved. The return could signify their own need for closure or resolution that they couldn't find elsewhere. One of the most common reasons why people come back into your life is because they haven't found the emotional closure they need. Relationships, even when they end, leave behind lingering feelings, unanswered questions, and a sense of unfinished business. When someone walks away without truly understanding what went wrong or without fully processing their emotions, it can create a sense of emotional unrest that stays with them long after the relationship has ended. In some cases, people come back not because they're looking to rekindle a relationship or because they've had a major shift in feelings, but because they're hoping to find some sense of resolution, clarity, or closure that will allow them to move on completely. This need for closure can manifest in a variety of ways. They may return because they have unresolved questions about the relationship or about why it ended the way it did. Sometimes they might not fully understand the reason behind the breakup, and coming back allows them to seek answers that they didn't get the first time around. It's a way for them to feel like they can finally tie up loose ends and make sense of the experience they went through. The emotional weight of unresolved issues can linger for a long time, and if someone is unable to find peace within themselves, they might seek out that closure in the form of revisiting the past. The return isn't necessarily about rekindling the relationship. It's more about finding the emotional understanding and resolution they lacked when they left. This kind of return is often less about the relationship itself and more about the person's need to feel at peace with the situation. They might not have been able to fully process their feelings at the time of the breakup, and as time passes, the lack of resolution creates a gap that they feel the need to fill. They may not be ready to move forward or find closure on their own, and so they look to the person they were with for the answers that will help them understand the relationship better. It's an attempt to gain closure and emotional clarity, even if it means revisiting painful or complicated emotions. People need closure to heal, and sometimes they come back because they believe that only by addressing the past can they truly move forward. For the person receiving the return, this can be an emotionally charged situation. It's easy to feel confused or even hurt when someone reappears in your life, especially if you moved on or have worked hard to let go of the past. Their return can feel like it's stirring up old wounds, making it difficult to understand whether their intentions are sincere or if they're simply seeking closure for themselves. It's important to recognize that their need for closure is something they are trying to resolve within themselves, and it might not be about reestablishing a deeper connection with you. It's a personal journey for them, and while it can be helpful to give them the space to seek understanding, it's also essential to recognize your own emotional boundaries in the process. Sometimes closure can only be achieved when both individuals are willing to have open, honest conversations about what happened and why it ended. However, it's important to assess whether you are in a position to offer that closure or whether it's something they need to work through independently. If their return is only about their need for closure, it's important to make sure that both people are ready to face the emotions and conversations that might come with it. This doesn't mean reopening old wounds unnecessarily, but rather providing an opportunity for resolution if it feels appropriate. Sometimes a person returns to seek validation of their feelings or to reassure themselves of the emotional connection that was once there. After time apart, people often start questioning their own emotions, wondering if they made the right decision in ending the relationship or if they've simply moved on too quickly. They may find themselves wondering whether the connection they shared was as real or meaningful as they originally believed. In moments of doubt or emotional uncertainty, they might return to the person they once shared a deep bond with in an attempt to validate their own feelings to see if the spark or connection is still there. This isn't always about rekindling love or continuing the relationship. It's about confirming to themselves that their feelings were justified, that the bond they shared had real substance. The return often comes from a place of self reflection, a desire to revisit the past to see if what they felt was truly genuine or just a product of circumstances. They might be unsure whether they made the right choice in letting go, or perhaps they feel a sense of loss because they haven't been able to replicate that connection with someone else. Returning can feel like a way to test the waters to see if the feelings they had for you were real or just a passing phase. It's a way for them to measure the significance of the connection they had, hoping that by reconnecting with you, they'll either reaffirm their own emotional experiences or be able to let go completely. In these situations, the return is often motivated by the need to feel secure in their own emotions, rather than by a genuine desire to rebuild a relationship. They may need reassurance that what they experienced wasn't just in their head and that the love, connection, or bond was authentic. It's not uncommon for people to second guess their decisions or wonder if they made a mistake in ending something that had once felt so meaningful. The uncertainty of not knowing if their feelings were real or if they were simply caught up in the emotions of the moment can be unsettling, and they might look to the past to confirm their emotional experiences. This return is not necessarily about rekindling the relationship or picking up where things left off. Instead, it's often more about finding closure on their own emotional journey. They might be hoping that reconnecting with you will give them the clarity they need to understand whether their feelings for you were truly special or whether they were simply a phase. It's a way for them to gain emotional clarity and peace of mind, allowing them to either move on fully or understand that what they with you was truly meaningful. It's important to recognize that their return isn't necessarily about the relationship itself, but about their need for self validation. They might not be ready to rebuild what was lost, but they might need to prove to themselves that the emotional connection they felt was real. This can create a difficult dynamic for the person who is on the receiving end of this return. While it can feel flattering or validating to be sought after again, it's important to understand that their motivations are centered more around their own emotional reassurance than about reigniting the relationship. It's a complex situation as they may not fully understand their own intentions, which can make it difficult for both people to move forward with clarity. They may return because they've had time to reflect on their own personal growth and changes. Relationships often end when one or both people feel that they're not in the right place emotionally, mentally, or even in terms of maturity. During the time apart, they might have done the necessary work to improve themselves, whether through self reflection, therapy, or simply experiencing life outside of the relationship. The return could signify that they've spent time addressing their own issues and have developed a better understanding of who they are, what they want, and how they want to show up in relationships. This time apart may have been necessary for them to realize their own shortcomings or areas for growth, and now they feel ready to return with a fresh perspective. Sometimes people leave relationships not because they didn't care or because they weren't invested, but because they needed space to work on themselves. During the course of a relationship, personal growth can sometimes take a back seat, especially when both partners are focused on each other's needs or navigating their emotional connection. Time apart allows individuals to reconnect with their own sense of identity, to focus on their own goals and ambitions, and to gain a clearer understanding of how they want to be in the world. This growth process often leads to a shift in perspective, and in some cases, the individual might feel ready to return to a past relationship with new insights, new priorities, and the emotional maturity to handle the challenges that come with it. The return in this case isn't driven by a sudden surge of romantic desire or nostalgia for the past, but rather by the person's readiness to approach the readiness place of greater emotional stability. They've had the time and space to reflect on the things that may have gone wrong previously, and they might be returning because they now understand themselves better and are in a better position to contribute positively to the relationship. This kind of return reflects a shift in their emotional intelligence, where they've learned how to handle their own emotions, communicate more effectively, and engage in a relationship in a healthier way. Their return is an indication that they now have the tools to show up in the relationship with more awareness and emotional balance. This type of return can bring a sense of hope, as it suggests that the person is no longer the same person who left. The lessons they've learned and the personal growth they've achieved may allow for a more meaningful and fulfilling connection the second time around. However, this kind of return also requires an open and honest conversation about the growth that has taken place during the time apart. Both partners need to be clear about the changes they've made and how those changes will impact the dynamic between them moving forward. If both people are willing to engage in this process of growth together, the relationship can have the potential to evolve into something healthier and more sustainable. However, it's important to approach this situation with caution. Even though they might have grown and changed, there are no guarantees that their return will lead to lasting happiness or a better relationship. Growth is a process, and it can take time to fully integrate new understandings into a relationship. It's crucial for both individuals to assess whether they are truly aligned in their values, goals, and emotional readiness, rather than rushing into a reconnection based solely on the hope that things will be different. The return may signify personal growth, but both people must also be committed to continue growth together to ensure that the relationship can thrive. They may return because they've realized that no one else compares to you. This realization can be both powerful and humbling. When someone is in a relationship, it's easy to take the connection for granted or become too accustomed to the dynamics at play. People often leave relationships thinking that they will find something better or different in someone else. It's a natural part of life to seek out new experiences or new connections, hoping to find something that matches or exceeds the bond you once had. However, the reality of finding something truly comparable is often more difficult than people anticipate. Relationships are complex, and the bond you share with someone is uniquely shaped by time, experience, and the intimate history you built together. After leaving, someone may find that they're constantly measuring other relationships or connections against what they had with you. They might date other people, form new connections, or even experience moments of intense emotional or physical attraction, but something feels off. The depth of the connection you share with them might be something they can't replicate with anyone else. This realization can be difficult as it challenges their assumptions about what they were looking for or what they thought they wanted. They may come to understand that the connection with you was not something they could simply replace with someone else, no matter how much time passes or how many other people they meet. What they're ultimately seeking is a relationship that offers the same kind of emotional fulfillment, trust, and connection they once had with you. No matter how much they search, no one else seems to fit in the same way. This understanding might not come immediately. It could be the result of them meeting other people and realizing that those relationships don't offer the same level of comfort, security, or mutual understanding that yours did. It could also come after a period of reflection where they assess what they truly need from a relationship and they realize that the qualities they appreciated in you are rare and difficult to find in others. This realization can create a deep sense of regret for what was lost. And in some cases, it motivates them to return in hopes of rekindling that bond. When someone returns because they've realized that no one else compares to you, it often means they've undergone some self-reflection and growth. They now understand the value of the relationship, not just in the abstract sense, but in terms of the deep emotional connection and compatibility you shared. They realized that what they had with you wasn't something they can just replace with someone else. It was unique and meaningful. And now that they've experienced what's out there, they understand that no one else fills the same space in their life. This kind of return is significant because it indicates that the person has come to terms with the importance of what you offered them emotionally. It's not a matter of convenience or temporary attraction, but a deeper realization that your relationship brought something valuable and irreplaceable into their life. However, just because they've come to this realization doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to rebuild or that they are even capable of doing so in a healthy way. It's important to approach this return with caution, recognizing that while the realization they've had is significant, it doesn't automatically guarantee a successful reconnection. There's still the need for mutual understanding, growth, and a willingness to address the past before moving forward. The real reason they came back is not just about you, it's about timing, personal growth, and the comfort of something familiar. But that doesn't mean it has to define the future. You have the power to shape what happens next. So remember, just because they came back doesn't mean you have to take them back. You're in control of your own story, and you get to decide if they're the right chapter for you moving forward.